What we do here is go back.
How's it going, everyone, and welcome to episode 66 of the Lost Media podcast. Today we're talking about the very hard to find episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience. I should start this podcast off by saying this is not officially completely lost media. I have a strange obsession with media that is very difficult for the average person to discover online and is very inaccessible in a lot of ways for people to find. If you do enough digging, you can somehow find these episodes, but they are not easy to find, the ones I'm going to talk about today on the podcast. I'm really interested in them though. It isn't technically lost media. If you go on the Joe Rogan Experience Lost Media wiki page, there is a ton of episodes there. There's too many that have been removed from Spotify, and they're all listed as found, which is weird because at the top of the page it says partially found podcast and the status is partially found, which to me makes no sense. But I kind of want to look at these three in particular because they're very, very difficult to come across online. It is almost lost media. It's just not completely lost media. If enough people try searching for this at once, then there's an accessible link somewhere that people can go to straight away. And there's the episode of the Joe Rogan Experience that is not that easy to find. But it's media that is not quite accessible. It is, but it's not quite. So if you're just an average person just trying to find the podcast, you got to do some searching, you got to do some digging, you got to put some effort into it. And I consider that kind of lost media. It's easily accessible. Not easily accessible, I should say. There's three in particular here I wanted to talk about. As I said, there's one that's I'm going to go over very vaguely that I don't find particularly interesting. There's another one that is very interesting, but is not that controversial. It's just the backlash that makes it interesting. And then there's the last one that is quite, I guess you'd say, controversial and was shunned after it was released by just about everyone. And that's the one I want to talk about the most here on the Lost Media podcast today. But I'm going to talk about the first podcast example, the first podcast guest that I'm confused about as to why this one is lost. Now, I'm probably going to need the help of anyone who knows a lot more about the Joe Rogan Experience than I do. I've seen a few episodes of his podcast, but I don't follow it religiously like some people do. I'm more interested in the last topic that I'm going to talk about today, and I'm more interested in the fact that some episodes can be removed off Spotify, removed off YouTube, removed off all the platforms that host the Joe Rogan Experience episodes, and you just got to look heaps to find. But I've talked about that. Maynard Keenan is the one I want to talk about to start off with. This is a rock star kind of dude that isn't that well known, but he did appear on the podcast, and his episode, you can't find it anywhere on YouTube. There are some clips that you can find, but the full podcast, I haven't been able to find it easily at all. I'm not sure if this guy became incredibly controversial. Again, this is the one I know the least about that I thought was worthy of talking about because I think there's some sort of piece of this that I don't know about already, and you guys can tell me in the comments why this one was just completely deleted online and isn't accessible that easily. But yes, this is one of the mysterious ones that I think is kind of strange. Let's just say that, as to why you can't find it anywhere on YouTube or online that easily. Just a rock star dude, just a dude who's a musician. Was there something about him that was controversial or deeply disturbing? We don't know. You probably do know, but I don't. And that's why that was the example that I was going to gloss over very quickly, because this was just intriguing to me. The reason why I mentioned it and the reason why I put that on the list was it was just intriguing that when I looked up this person's name and the Joe Rogan podcast next to it, nothing comes up. And I obviously found out about it from an article that said that it just doesn't come up on YouTube and it's not there anymore. And there's just very little clips and very little remnants of this podcast, which fascinates me. There has to be a reason behind that. Again, might need you guys' help in the comments because seriously, I should know, but I don't. Brian Dunning, everyone knows this episode who's a fan of the Joe Rogan Experience, who has kind of deep dived into his history. This was mentioned in a recent Too Lazy to Try video. This is a guy who reviews a lot of Joe Rogan moments and a lot of podcasting moments from notable internet personalities. And this episode, everyone hated it. Everyone hated this guy. Joe was actually quite professional in this episode, and he did quite a good job, in my opinion, to not kind of, bite back at this dude, because this guy was just baiting him into an argument the whole episode, essentially. And this guy had previously written an article about Joe and how he was one of the worst celebrities for spreading misinformation and getting people to believe in all sorts of stuff. And he was just trying to clarify that he is the type of person who will say that he thinks things need to be looked at more, but won't outright say, oh, I'm a believer in this, everyone should believe me. But there were a few parts in this podcast that he was kind of exposed for being a bit, incorrect on a few things. And the other guy just got shat on by Joe Rogan's fan base and the audience in general. And he eventually, I think, went to prison for a little while for tax evasion. Again, not 100% sure with that. But he did get in trouble for something to do with avoidance of tax, I believe. So Brian Dunning, I've watched this episode back, and this guy didn't really annoy me that much. I just think he was misinformed with a lot of his stuff, and he was just trying to create a story and really wasn't trying to be a complete jerk to Joe. I didn't deem this one as that big of a shocker, I guess you could say. I just thought he kind of did the wrong thing by thinking he knew a lot about what Joe was all about, and then he kind of found out when he went on the show that Joe's kind of a laid-back sort of dude and isn't the guy who's trying to aggressively promote hate like maybe Alex Jones. Brian Dunning just I think they just were embarrassed by this episode, and that's why they removed it from YouTube. And it isn't easy to find at all. The Too Lazy to Try guy said that it was really not that easy for him to find clips. You watch him reviewing the podcast and certain bits, and whenever the camera angle changes, the screen changes. The screen just kind of shudders and takes a while to catch up the frame rate. That's how you know that something has been bootlegged and is some cheap recording over cheap recording of different re-uploads after re-uploads. So they're really trying to hide this, the people from the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. And obviously I think Joe knows there's some moments in this where he's done probably the wrong thing, and he realizes he's done the wrong thing, or he's called out for it. And I think there was a more notable moment where there's a dude who is selling some sort of hangover cure that can stop you from getting drunk the next night if you have this hangover cure while you're drinking the night before, and then the next morning you wake up, you got no hangover, and then you try drinking the next night and you can't get drunk. And this was this huge conspiracy thing, and Joe outright said in this podcast at least 10 times almost, this guy's not selling this product. He's not selling anything. He's not selling. Trust me, he's not selling. He said it multiple times, and we found out after this podcast that he was actually selling this. And it's potentially, controversial from someone who's meant to be a regarded, I guess you could say, chemist. But yeah, I'm not very privy to the actual person. This is just the story I'm trying to tell behind why this episode may be hidden from the people from the Joe Rogan Experience, because of Joe just gets his facts wrong multiple times and says he knows something that he doesn't quite know. And it just doesn't paint him in the best light, I think. And also, obviously, the backlash. It's painfully obvious. Brian Dunning, everyone hated him. The end. The last one I wanted to talk about today is Dr. Robert Malone. Now, this is the most infamous episode of the entire Joe Rogan Experience history, in my opinion. Infamous is probably the wrong word. Controversial for no reason is probably the right way to describe it, because Dr. Robert Malone is essentially trying to talk about a conspiracy. Now, whether you believe this conspiracy is correct or not, it's totally up to you. The problem with this podcast, in my opinion, is the fact that after 9 hours, it was just taken down off YouTube and Spotify. And any attempts to re-upload this were removed as well. And not by the people from Joe Rogan, by the way, the Joe Rogan Experience, from unknown sources. This guy, to elaborate, is talking about COVID-19 vaccination conspiracies, if I can talk correctly. And he's basically explaining that we've looked at these vaccinations for a long period of time, and for many years there's been flaws in vaccinations, and it just wasn't ready to be released to such a large community. I think I did listen to this for about the first 40 minutes of it on a very dodgy website that was the only place I could find it at the start of the year, just because I was interested in, hidden media. I've always been interested in lost hidden media, but I was interested in the fact that this was hidden. And so I really wanted to, give it a watch. To me, it was quite boring, so I'm not really interested in that stuff. But it did present a lot of valuable theories. And I think Dr. Robert Malone didn't come across in any way as some kind of nutter. And when someone's talking about these sorts of things, it's kept online when the person sounds like a nutter. It sounds like they're just talking crap, whereas Robert really sounded like he knew what he was talking about, because he was the person who invented a lot of the ingredient, a lot of the things that make up the vaccine that we know. So that's why it was controversial, because he's the guy who knows so much about it, and he's got this huge platform on the Joe Rogan Experience to talk to millions and millions of people, and nobody wants that being talked about because of potential legal issues with everything associated with that. Take what you will from what I'm saying from it. I'm not trying to avoid it. I just I'm just trying to discuss how interesting it is that it was just shunned from the internet, and it was banned outright, and it all of a sudden became this big deal. I mean, obviously people download it within the first 7 hours. It can't become lost media. It's not possible for any of these Joe Rogan Experience podcasts to become lost media. Even the really old ones, it's just impossible. It's too popular a podcast. As I've said multiple times in this, the fact that it is so difficult to find to the average Joe who's browsing through an episode they want, and who has to dig and dig and dig through the internet to try and find these episodes, it's almost lost media. I think in some cases, if you've got to put a lot of effort into trying to find something for that period that you're looking for, it is lost media. And that's why I thought it was worth talking about all these lost Joe Rogan Experience episodes, all these hidden ones. It really, really fascinates me. But the Dr. Robert Malone one, I never saw anything wrong with this episode. When I watched this, I was just kind of boring to me, as I said. I didn't see this guy as spreading anything particularly harmful or particularly shocking. I was like, oh, well, this is fair enough. Like, this should be common knowledge, like, to most people. People should, they shouldn't just believe everything they see, is kind of what Robert Malone was saying. And he's making the point that this stuff isn't really ready to be distributed to such a wide amount of people, to such large populations, and it isn't really that great for people, for just everyone across the board. I think that was the point he was making. Guys, please correct me. Please call me an idiot, dickhead, bonehead in the comments. Do whatever you want if I'm talking shit and what my memory of this isn't exactly to the T, but I'm pretty sure that's what he was saying, the points he was making. And he was spreading he was essentially saying throughout the whole podcast that there is a massive conspiracy going along with this, and with misinformation being spread around vaccines and stuff, and the fact that he believed it wasn't real. Now, again, this isn't a political podcast. This isn't me trying to tell people to believe a certain way. I am just saying what happened in it. And the fact that it's fascinating that it was taken down so quickly from Spotify and YouTube. And in my opinion, for all these reasons, and for it being just strange that it was that people were trying to hide it. Again, think of that whichever way you want. I'm not trying to say it's a certain way. I'm just saying that's what makes it really fascinating to me as a piece of hidden media, I guess you could say. Difficult to find media. But yeah, this guest, there was nothing crazy about him, which makes it even more, you know, I guess you could say suspicious. Now I'm sounding like I'm trying to tell everyone, hey, oh, there's some sort of conspiracy with all this, and they're really trying to hide it. The episode is playing behind me, by the way. You can find 25 minutes of it on YouTube. I know that's when you start playing the Curb Your Enthusiasm. Boom, boom, boom. It is a much longer episode, though, than 25 minutes, and trying to find the rest of it isn't easy. So that's why I thought it was the most dubious episode. And that version on YouTube is in very poor quality. So yeah, that's the 3 that I chose today. But please check out the Lost Media Wiki in the description. There's a bunch of episodes that aren't on Spotify but are accessible. And there's sources in that as well that will show you how to find those. If you're a huge Joe Rogan Experience fan or a huge fan of episodes that aren't easy to find on YouTube that have been deleted on Spotify or YouTube. Thanks so much for watching, guys. This has been episode 66 of the Lost Media Podcast. As I've said in previous episodes, there's a lot of stuff happening. Haven't really mentioned that when I go away in a week, I'm actually filming a lot of content, and some of that is going to be uploaded to this YouTube channel, and some of that is, all of that is unrelated to Lost Media. So I'm going to make a little disclaimer and video like this setup in the first 30 seconds to a minute of all those videos to basically say, this isn't a Lost Media video. Watch it at your own risk, or watch it if you want to. But I've decided to mention it now first up because I want to give viewers warning at the end of the next 5 to 10 episodes that, hey, this is coming up on my channel. It's not necessarily Lost Media. But if you want to watch it, awesome. If you don't, I don't blame you, but this is a one-off, very rare occasion where on this Lost Media channel, I upload completely unrelated stuff to the channel. They're just one-off special event videos that will be posted once and never again. I think there's only 3, so that'll be posted to the channel in a few weeks' time. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. That's the only little update I wanted to say today. More podcasts coming in future days. I'm recording a lot at the moment, so you guys will get lots. Cheers, guys. Goodbye. Bye.